Our first speaker is Hilmar Klinkott from the University of Kiel, and he will be speaking on how to govern an empire, the Inscriptions of Darius I, as a constitutional program. But a little bit about Professor Klinkott. Professor Hilmar Klinkott studied ancient history, classical archaeology, and Latin at the Ruprecht-Karl-Universität Heidelberg, earning an MA in 1997. He continued his studies at the University of Tübingen, earning his PhD in 2002. His thesis, Der Satrap, ein Achaemenischer Amtsträger und seine Handlungsspielräume, was published in 2005. And then I'm skipping a bit. He was appointed full professor at the Institute for Klassische Altertumskunde of the Christian Albrechts Universität. Since then, he continues developing his focus on the history of the ancient Near East and the Achaemenid Empire. And I welcome Professor Klinkott to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and of course I have to thank very much the organizers to have me. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and to join this wonderful conference. Because of the time, I will just go medias in res. In 1977, Fritz Gschnitzer analyzed the claim to power of Darius I according to the Byzantine inscription and Herodotus report. Concerning the latter, he detailedly studied the so-called constitutional debate of the 7 Persian rebels and came up with the idea that this anecdote is an interpolation of Herodotus, intrinsically Greek in its character. Based on this study, it is communist opinion until now that discussions on constitutional models and on the specific form of the monarchic constitution did not take place in the ancient Near East, in particular the Achaemenid Empire. With this in mind, it is worth studying the royal representation inscriptions of the Achaemenid great kings, especially Darius I, under the perspective of constitutional law concerning the monarchic disposition. For this purpose, please excuse me for moving back and forth between the different Darius inscriptions under thematical aspects and ignoring, in this case, the highly discussed question of their chronological order. One of the most important texts is the tomb inscription of Darius I at Naqsh-e Rustam, in particular the text Naqsh-e Rustam B, because it seems to present a manifest of the political order under the rule of the Achaemenid great kings. This might be one of the reasons why later Xerxes I copied the inscription and placed it twice near the palace of Persepolis, known as the inscription Xerxes Persepolis L. In Naqsh-e Rustam B, paragraph 1, a short introduction or preamble tells the main overall subject of the text, the wisdom and ability bestowed upon Darius by the god Mazda. The following text is then structured into 2 main parts. The first part, A, from paragraph 2 to 6, deals with the first quality, wisdom, while Part B, from paragraph 7 to 10, focus on the second quality, on the ability of the king, closed by the paragraphs 11 and 12 as addressed to further successors. The first part A dwells on 5 aspects, particularly shaping the royal quality of wisdom, while the second part B on the royal physical ability is explained by further 4 aspects. Especially the first part is marked by a lot of legal features which confirm and define the royal legitimization by its constitutional character. First of all, it deals with the king of justice. We know this topic from the Byzantine inscription of Darius I, which reflects it in paragraph 63. This text defines the great king in his position by law and justice. Here, as in the Naqsh-e Rustam text, a main aspect is the rightly balanced judgment. Accordingly, the great king is the only authority which guarantees to prevent injustice against both parts, the strong and the weak ones. In juridical terms, Naqsh-e Rustam B explains a general principle of appreciation of values which determines the adequacy of reasonableness. This principle is fundamental for the later paragraph Audiat et altera pars, which focus on the balance of judgment. But Naqsh-e Rustam B, paragraph 2, is unique in its regulation of principle tolerance, considerateness and protection. It says, "It is not my desire that the weak one might be treated wrongly for the strong one's sake, and that is not my desire that the strong one might be treated wrongly for the weak one's sake." This statement is so remarkable because it exceeded the pure protection of a minority. Instead, it seems to consider the, so to say, democratic principle to protect also the matters of the strong in the sense of a more powerful or a majority. The protection of a minority is not allowed to dictate the interests of a majority or of the political powerful. That means also the responsible one. Furthermore, the text reflects for a first time the concept of a superior legal understanding, which also affects to the position of the great king. At the same time, he is the warrantor of this legally balanced order. It is this quality of the balanced justice which stabilizes the internal imperial conditions. Paragraph 5 of the Susa inscription E of Darius puts this aspect into concrete terms when it says, "I achieved it by the favor of our master that one does not strike the other at all, but everyone is on his place. The law which is mine they do fear, so that the one who is the stronger does not strike and destroy the weaker." In Naqsh-e Rustam B, the paragraph on the king of justice immediately turns to the topic of royal self-control, closely connected by the stylistics of the text. The following lines touch a new aspect which essentially characterizes the royal quality of a balanced right judgment. Therefore, the paragraph explicitly explains at the beginning, "What is right, that is my desire." And then continues, "I am not hot-tempered. Whatever occurs to me in a quarrel, I firmly hold back in my thinking. I am firmly in control of myself." Formulated by a negative confession, the king explains the physical self-control and self-restraint of his emotions. Thereby, in his decisions, he is not guided by emotions, but by rationality. Thus, the text relates to the juridical category defining an appropriate method and competence for verifying and applying the mentioned reasonableness. This aspect and its very clear expression for defining royal qualities and the expectation in a legal king is unique in the Achaemenid royal inscriptions and an essential difference to Assyrian and Babylonian examples concerning the king of justice. So, the next paragraph on care and punishment starts with, in its first part by explaining the abstract ideal which follows the practical realization by the king's action. According to the principle of reasonableness explained in paragraph 2 of the inscription, the first part now deals with the adequacy of the method. The second particular part relates to the necessity of the right method in the category on the verification and of reasonableness. The main topic of the paragraph is a discussion on the punitive purpose. In German it would be Strafzweck. Therefore, the king explicitly rejects what should not be. Even in the linguistic form, the text is very clear. Wrongdoing is negated and sanctioned. So it says, "Who does harm according to the harm done, thus I punish him. It is not my desire that a man should do harm. Moreover, that is not my desire. If he should do harm, he should not be punished." To clarify the punitive purpose, justice is to punish wrongdoing. Obviously, this maxim is a general principle of the Achaemenid monarchy from the very beginning, as Darius I in paragraph 64 clearly says. In the course of this, the great king is the chief justice. Beyond the clear position of the king against wrongdoing, this part reflects an absolute concept of justice, so to say, a kind of metaphysical legal system in which wrongdoing must not be unpunished. Maybe it is designated by the Old Persian rasta mentioned in the Naqsh-e Rustam inscription paragraph 2, related to the term arshta, and set against the Old Persian drauga, the falsehood, in paragraph 3 of the same inscription. This absolute concept of justice is very important for the constitutional condition of the empire. It defines the great king as legal authority with his duty to guarantee the legal order and thus stabilizes the empire. The constitutionalizing idea is already introduced in the Byzantine inscription when it states in paragraph 55, "If thus you shall think, let my country be consolidated." Finally, the competence of the great king as protector of the legal order is also an important element of his legitimization, as we have seen in the Byzantine inscription, paragraph 63. Against this backdrop, the royal inscriptions used to refer on the king's law, Old Persian data. So, Naqsh-e Rustam paragraph 3 tells the law that was mine that held them stable. That means for the case of the rebellion, I am king, by the favor of Aramazda, I put it, that means the rebellious country, in its proper place. What I have said to them, that they, the countries, did as was my desire. The relation to the general principle of appreciation of values determining the adequacy of reasonableness is evidently elucidated in the just mentioned Darius I inscription when it emphasizes, "The law which is mine, they do fear." This condensed phrase, interconnecting basic principles of justice and categories of law, brings up a further topic: tolerance, considerateness, and protection of a minority, which has generally been touched in the Darius Naqsh-e Rustam, paragraph 2. The next paragraph relates to the question of practical handling the balance of judgment. Thereby the paragraph takes up the principle of reasonableness by putting paragraph 2 in concrete terms and defines the royal principle of criminal procedure. Probably as one of the earliest sources, the Naqsh-e Rustam B inscription mentions the legal principle of audiat et altera pars, when it says, "What a man says about another man, that does not convince me until I have heard the statement of both." This legal maxim, too, is substantially connected with the great king as a sovereign. Only his authority makes the background and orientation of the royal power comprehensible, and so makes sense of the paragraphs 3, 4, and 5. So the text presents a further procedural basic principle which offered the standard of an, so to say, objective judgment. Especially this paragraph reflects an intensive analysis of constituting conditions in the background, aware of the possibility of undesirable developments in this form of a multi-ethnic and society and imperial state. The latter are even able to bring down the total structure. Such a systematic collapse of the legal order is not only hypothetical, but based on concrete experiences, as the Byzantine inscription detailedly reports as an exemplum. Therefore, it is a specific element that in regard to the peoples or the countries of the empire, the consideration of the other side includes the aspect of local autonomy. Its guarantee is given by the great king, in concrete, his data, the law, which is not mentioned explicitly in this inscription, Naqsh-e Rustam B, but in Naqsh-e Rustam A, and is taken into account in Susa I, or later under Xerxes I in the Diva inscription. The principle of a balanced judgment which takes the interests of the other side into account is the basic element of the data as a royal justice in each single case. Josef Wiesehöfer calls it Einzelfallgerechtigkeit. The importance of this aspect as guiding principle is once more emphasized at the end of the inscription, Naqsh-e Rustam B, paragraph 11, when it says, "Let not that seem the best to you which is spoken in your ears, listen also to that which is said besides." The enumeration of legal basic principles in the paragraph 3 to 5 is completed by a paragraph on merit and wages as positive perspective for loyal followers. Paragraph 6 says, "What a man achieves or brings according to his power, by that I become satisfied, and it is very much my desire, and I am pleased and give generously to loyal men." In linguistic parallelism to paragraph 5, this statement formulates under a legal perspective the right behavior expected by the great king. According to this legal system, he accepts the corresponding service of the loyal man. The appropriate correctness is confirmed by the satisfaction of the great king. That means these lines deal with compliance and effect of right actions. They ensure a royal confirmation in form of a reciprocal gift in return. Loyalty against the great king and thus legally compliant behavior of the subjects are the main aspects and intended objectives of the legal order, as the Byzantine inscription paragraph 8 clearly underlines at the beginning when it says, "In these countries the man who was loyal, him I treated well, and who was disloyal, him I punished severely." Furthermore, the Byzantine inscription demonstrates the royal confirmation of right and loyal behavior and its wage in concrete. So, it exemplifies in detail what Naqsh-e Rustam B, paragraph 6 calls to give generously to loyal men, a constantly privileged status of Darius named followers. Viewed to the interrelation of the great king to his followers, the generally intended feedback effect of the legitimized king to his people may be as a kind of royal accountability, is highly remarkable, because it affects vice versa the legitimization of the great king, as mentioned in the Byzantine inscription. It says, "Now let what has been done by me convince you, thus make it known to the people, do not conceal it." This paragraph is exceptional because it shows the importance of the people, the Old Persian kara, for the acceptance and legitimization of the great king as political institution. A refusal of royal accountability directly affects the rejection of the people, the kara, the withdrawal of the divine protection, and thus the royal ruin. So it says, "If you shall conceal this record and not make it known to the people, may our master be your destroyer, and may offspring not be to you." The consequences are exemplified in paragraph 10 of the Byzantine inscription. Because the king Cambyses evades the disclosure of killing murders, the people, the kara, became disloyal. This affected a situation which made Gaumata's coup possible because of false statements, so that he was able to seize kingship illegally. In contrary, the right behavior of a king, the realization of its accountability to the people, is demonstrated by the great king's announcement in his empire. So the Byzantine inscription says, "And it was written down and was read aloud before me. Afterwards I have sent this form of writing everywhere into the countries. The people strove to use it." This is much more than only illustrative. It confirms the legally correct performance of the constituting order. This is important because against the background, the Byzantine inscription is not only a report about the res gestae of Darius, a legitimization of his rule and a presentation of Achaemenid ideology, it is also a justification of the royal deeds defeating the rebels and their legally necessary punishment as usurpers. Under this perspective, the Byzantine inscription is an example of the applied legal order. The royal accountability in mind, the Achaemenid great kingship is not absolutistic, a tyranny and despotism as the Greek sources used to describe it, but seems to remember a kind of constitutionalized monarchy. Certainly it is incorrect to suggest a democratic aspect in these regulations. The people, Old Persian kara, and the royal accountability to it seem to be specified as the people of the Perses in concrete. So the Persepolis inscription E paragraph 3 underlines its privileged status as well as its role as guarantor of the constitutional order. It says, "If the Persian people shall be protected, this blissful happiness existing very far off." The great king relies on the acceptance and assistance of the people of Persia. Therefore, Persepolis D paragraph linguistically mentions the people of Parsa on the very first position, even before the great king, thus explaining the great king's obligation against it. In consequence, there may be a constituting aspect too when Darius tells in Persepolis E, by the favor of our master, these are the countries of which I took possession together with this Persian people, the people of Parsa. Maybe this privileged status of the people of Parsa is also a reason why the great king emphasizes his ethnicity or citizenship as a Persian and son of a Persian. It is this legal status as member of the Persides which inter alia mainly qualifies the great king for this position. Last but not least, this constitutional importance of Parsa may explain why the great king explicitly calls himself not king of Persia, but king in Persia. Taking all together, Naqsh-e Rustam B, paragraph 2, 3, 4, and 5 demonstrate a superior, not ideologized or religious, but legal understanding of what is wrong and right. The existence of such an abstract idea of justice, even in political matters, is only possible against the background of a detailed analysis. That means a debate on the international institutional framework of the monarchic constitution. One of its results is the fact that a fixed general corpus of imperial law is missing in the Achaemenid Empire. Instead, the legal principles guarantee the protection of local peculiarities not because of the king's personal willing, but because of his constitutional law. It demands from the great king to protect the weaker, that means powerless groups or minorities, to respect their interests even against another, stronger, that is more powerful or major side, and thus to judge in every single case according to the specific local conditions, as Naqsh-e Rustam B emphasizes in iteration at the very end of the inscription, when it says, what the weak one does, observe that too. Of course, there is no direct proof of a constitutional debate in the Achaemenid sources as Herodotus reports it, but maybe it is necessary to free the mind from the specific imprint, Greek imprint, in the monarchic or anti-monarchic discourse. Of course, democratic, oligarchic, and monarchic discourses are core elements of the Greek constitutional debate and are not to be found in the Achaemenid inscriptions. Otherwise, the inscriptions of Darius, especially Naqsh-e Rustam B, demonstrate as textualized outcome that there must have been previous intellectual approaches to the topic on various aspects of constituting law. In this background, the form, structure, and character of constitutional frameworking, the traditional monarchic setting, must have been discussed intensively. I'm far away to postulate a democratic movement in Achaemenid Persia, although Darius established such a constitution in the local context of the Ionian polis. But these aspects seem to be indications for the intensity of constitutional reflections, certainly in a completely different way and outcome than in Greece. Furthermore, the Achaemenid royal inscriptions of Darius are not only, but also legal texts. Unfortunately, we do not know who performed the legal contents and which was the process of juridical abstraction and textualization, but we do see the results. The royal inscriptions of Darius are conceived as an interconnected oeuvre about the legal order, which shapes the constitutional system of the Achaemenid Empire. So, for example, the relation between the weaker and the stronger is a topic discussed in Naqsh-e Rustam B, Darius Bizitun inscription, and Susa E. However, the legal regulations do not focus only single human beings, martyr, men, it says, but also on countries, as Darius Susa E clearly points out. In the same way, the Old Persian term bandaka signifies human beings and countries or peoples as loyal followers of the great king. The loyalty of these countries proves the acceptance of the Achaemenid constitutional system, as Bizitun paragraph 8 clarifies, by the compliance of the royal law. Therefore, bandaka is also a legal term describing the mutually binding legal relationship between the great king as a political institution and the countries or peoples of his empire. The great king is the political and legal representative of the right way, and thus the superior legislative and juridical authority legitimized by the god our master. The king also knows the right place of each country in his empire and is the only one to put countries or peoples on it, that means to reinstall the right order. Therefore, the instructions of the great king are royal law, data, and expression of the practiced legal order set by the god our master. The religious legitimization especially refers on the legislative, juridical competence of the great king, when Susa F says, "Our master had brought me aid, what I ordered Framatam to do, that he made successful for me." Maybe this legal background is the reason why the great king used to emphasize in the royal inscriptions their quality as Framatara in addition to the position as great king. Here an example from Naqsh-e Rustam. Most of the longer important royal inscriptions touch the same legal topics. However, they do not only simply repeat the same topics or phrases, but deal with particular legal aspects, explaining and illustrating its specifics. In consequence, the inscriptions are not simply topic repetition, but offer further explanations, commentations, and elaborations. So, under legal aspect, the Achaemenid royal inscriptions seem to be adapted to one another, or seem to relate to a legal compendium as underlying template. The use of the legal principles which Naqsh-e Rustam B formulates in an abstract universal manner, and other inscriptions like Bizitun and Susa E explain in a more detailed focusing, this use shows that the specific regulations are always placed and related to a political imperial context. This in view, the inscription Naqsh-e Rustam B is much more than a political program or a guideline for a future ideal great king. It is the programmatic definition of a constitutional system fixing legal principles of government and is guaranteed by the authority of the thus legitimized great king. In fact, this system focuses on a multicultural and multi-ethnic imperial context. Beyond the fact that the great king had the most power of economic, technical, and military resources, the rule of this empire kept governed within stable inner conditions needed a concept which makes able the acceptance of the centralized authority. This royal authority had the duty to guarantee the balance between local, individual, and imperial general, that means royal interests. Therefore, it has legislative, judicative, and executive order for the regulations defined by this imperial constitution. So, the outlining of the Achaemenid Empire in the royal inscriptions as, for example, Xerxes Persepolis age does not only illustrate the area of royal power, it also marks a legal area in which the great king secures the constitutional order, because what was said to them by me, that they did. The law that was mine that held them stable. The imperial background of this concept is its textualized performance and legal dimension is unique in both the ancient Near East and Greece. Maybe this is also a reason for Herodotus' interpolation of the so-called constitutional debate during the takeover of Darius. If so, Herodotus might reflect on a monarchic legal program of the Achaemenid Empire developed and institutionalized under Darius I. Of course, he puts it literally into the typical Greek style of constitutional debates, but he also takes up the topic discussed in the Achaemenid Empire by a completely different approach than by the Greek philosophical or historiographical one. Therefore, Herodotus' interpolation of the constitutional debate might be understood in the way of a literary correspondence, as Johannes Haubold demonstrated for Mesopotamian and Greek literature. Just 1 minute. Finally, the PhD thesis of Daniel Kichel in Innsbruck will show the enormous intensity of legal aspects Herodotus related to in his histories. In fact, the monarchic concept of the Achaemenid great kings is groundbreaking for an imperial setting. Especially in the Greek world, a concept for a comprehensive organization of a multi-ethnic and multicultural political structure does not exist. This in mind, Alexander the Great had not an own Greek or Macedonian approach to govern and administrate the huge empire he conquered in the East. The adaptation of the Achaemenid constitutional model pointed the way for the Eastern Hellenistic monarchies. I thank you very much, and especially you.